from WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 178, all about the Silmarillion, of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, being the 178th part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I am reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. And actually, I can now officially say I have completed reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today I'm joined once again by KnewBettaDoBetta, who has declared that we are feuding over the Silmarillion.
We are enemies. You are my arch nemesis now. So, I'm ready to spar. Let's go. You've completed the book. Let's see. Let's have some back and forth. Let's have some discourse here.
Well, unfortunately, I feel like there can't be that much back and forth because I feel like anything I've read has just been erased from my brain. It's gone. It was like in one ear and out the other. I was retaining it for a while, and then those like 2 months off to watch Rings of Power, and then now coming back, especially to these last two sections, which are pretty prominent with the Rings of Power show, actually. Yeah. So now my brain is all confused and conflicting, the two different storylines that we've got going on. So
I'll give you credit. The Calibeth, extremely hard to retain.
Okay.
A lot of names.
Oh, it's so many. Oh my gosh.
A lot of names. So
why don't you, since the last time you were on, actually I think I had you on for the season premiere, right? I can't remember. You came on at some point to discuss some episodes.
I can't remember either.
Yeah.
I've been on so many podcasts and doing so many podcasts.
I know, right?
My brain is mush as well.
Yeah. But since the show has finished, since you've last been on, why don't you give us a quick, wrap up of what your thoughts and feelings were with season 1?
Okay, yeah. So I thought season 1 was pretty good. I definitely thought there was room for improvement. There were some things I absolutely loved, some things I absolutely did not love. But overall, I give this season like a 7.5 or 8. Pretty good, but not like perfect. I loved the stuff they did with the relationship with Disa and
oh my
Doran.
gosh, right?
Amazing. Great. I thought the Hobbits did a really good job, whereas a lot of people thought that the Hobbits were going to be nonsensical, didn't make sense. They really grounded the story, brought heart to the story. Mm-hmm. I love that. I absolutely love Elrond and Durin's relationship. Really brought humor, and then Elrond's relationship with his father that he spoke of, that gives you some nostalgia there. And then Durin's range of emotions was probably one of the best things I've seen.
Oh, phenomenal. Yeah. I think the dwarves were, I've said it a million times, so the listeners are probably like, we get it already. But I think the dwarves were like the highlight of the season. And I don't think
they were amazing.
I feel like they didn't necessarily, the showrunners, I feel like they didn't necessarily know that the dwarves were going to do so well, Yeah. Galadriel,
what I had been saying kind of played out. So I was happy with that. I said, give it some time for her exposition, for her to change. And then you saw in the last 2 episodes, her learning from her mistakes. And then some, what Gil-galad actually said came true. So I actually was like, okay, she's learning. This is her changing, because everybody was like, well, why is she acting like this? And I'm like, it's a character arc. You know, they kind of used first age Galadriel and did it second age just for something for her to be doing, and for there to be a big story.
It's more interesting to watch a character grow and change and make mistakes than it is to just start out with someone who is already like, second age Galadriel who's experienced everything. It's more interesting. It makes for more interesting stories and everything to watch that happening.
Yeah, that's what I like that. I wish it would have happened a bit sooner. There were some pacing issues. I loved Halbrand. I called that from first time I saw him. Said that's Sauron. So people had, I did various bets. You know what I'm saying? So I won that. I was right on top of that. Called Gandalf being the stranger. I won that. You know what I'm saying? So my foresight is strong. It's very much like Galadriel. I absolutely did not like what they did with the Mithril at all. I thought
Yeah,
that
that
was
was confusing.
really poor decision, is what it is. Also, the ending, I love the two reveals, but I thought the rings of power that were made were rushed and they were backwards.
Mm.
So, as being a lore person, I had a problem with that. But I see what they're doing, and hopefully, the second season they can come back and kind of like rework it and say, okay, this is what we're doing. We're setting it up so now Anatar can come in and make these other rings. This is why Galadriel and Elrond don't trust them. Gil-galad already doesn't trust anybody, so that giving us a reason or excuse as to why they wouldn't trust anybody.
Oh
She's
yeah,
already
that's
been
true.
fooled. She's already been fooled. Now she won't trust anybody, and now going forward, and she won't tell on herself, and Elrond won't tell on her. So they're gonna just be like, I don't know this person. It could be I don't want nope. Don't have this person come to Linden. You know what I'm saying, or Rhaegon, and then Celebrimbor. We all know he just wants to do cool, make cool things. So he's going to listen to anybody, and we saw that. But yeah. So next season, as long as it's all about Sauron or Anatar or whoever, it should be great. And I think they have a lot of room to grow, learn from their mistakes. But overall, it was fine. The season was good. But they have a lot of room to improve and to really strengthen the show, and then to really just show that they have real gold line here that they can if they listen to what I'm saying? I think if they listen to people and they say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and move forward, I think it'd be good. But overall, it was pretty good. Not perfect, pretty good. Room for growth. I think we have an opportunity to get like an amazing second season. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of similar thoughts with me as well. Backing up a bit to how you were talking about the show and how they dealt with the making of the Rings of Power and stuff. Let's dive into what that lore is, because last week's episode we did the first half of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, and that is when the Rings of Power are forged in the canon. But my guest and I were very confused because he just kind of says it in one sentence, like, and the Rings of Power were made. So I know you know exactly like the order of everything and what's happening, but we were confused because it seemed like, okay, so the rings were made, and then Sauron makes the one ring, but then the elves keep their rings are somehow hidden from Sauron, and then the dwarven rings, Sauron like gives them to them, and then he wants them back later. We were very confused. So if you could get it straight with us before we move forward, that would be great.
All right. So when Sauron comes in into Middle Earth and reappears, and he comes in as Anatar, and he's trying to go to the Elven kingdoms. He's looking to corrupt the elves or influence the elves because they're the most powerful. So he's not looking at men. He's not looking at the dwarves. He's looking at the most powerful beings who he can influence and have sway over. So automatically the elves. So that's where he goes. He's not admitted into Linden because they're like, I don't know who you are. I don't trust this. So Gil-galad's like, no. Galadriel and Elrond are like, no. Celebrimbor very much wants to, get out of the shadow of his grandfather. He wants to be a great, he wants to make a name for himself, do something great, make a powerful thing, just like you see in the show. So he is open to someone being able to teach him. He says that he's an emissary from the Valar and that he has great knowledge. And he's called Anatar the Gift Giver. So who else better than him to teach Celebrimbor something? And Celebrimbor goes to Eregion, is welcome there, and he uses his corruption there. And he stays there for hundreds of years and teaches the elves all kinds of things of craft. Remember, Sauron is a student of Aule. He was one of his greatest students. So he knows things that nobody knows. And he is a great craftsman as well. So he teaches the elves of Eregion, great crafts and how to make lesser rings. And they're making they're just practicing basically until it's time to make the rings of power. And then they create the 16 rings of power. They create 16 rings of power, and these rings are only for the elves. Okay? And he teaches them the arts of how to do this, and they make them. Then Celebrimbor, being him, being the greatest smith besides his grandfather, he wants to make rings of his own, So he uses the craft that Sauron taught him to make these same three rings, but he does not tell Anatar, who is Sauron, that he made the three rings. So Sauron never
Oh.
touched the three, but they were made with the same craft that was taught to Celebrimbor by Sauron, by Anatar. So now there's 19 rings of power. So Sauron's whole plan is to create the one ring, put his power into the one ring so it is, strong enough to control all the other rings. Because once he does that and they have those rings on, he can see anything they've done. He can control them through the rings. He can control what they've made and he can control any of that type of thing, control their hearts and minds through these rings. That's his whole plan. So he can rule the world. So when he makes the one ring, he does it, puts most of his power into that ring. So it's something potent enough to control the other rings. And even though the three weren't touched by him, they still are under the sway of the one because they were made by the same art. So that same art that connects the rings is what gets Sauron caught out there. Because once he puts the one ring on his finger and he says the words, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, the elves are aware of him because the rings are connected. And they're like, oh, this is Sauron the whole time. The jig is up. So they take off their rings. So Sauron's plan does not work.
Okay. So originally he and Celebrimbor together make what
16.
become the 9 rings for the men and the 7 rings for the dwarves.
Yes, but they were only for elves. They weren't for men.
They weren't divided up yet.
They weren't divided up, and they were only for elves. The elves possessed them.
Okay.
And then Celebrimbor has the 3, so there's 19 rings of power, and then Sauron makes the 1, puts the 1 on. They're aware of him, so they take all their rings off. And then Sauron goes, you know what? Since that didn't work, he goes to Eregion and declares open war on them. He says, you guys got to give me the rings because I taught you how to make them. You wouldn't have been able to make them without my craft, so give me the rings back. They're basically mine. And they hide the rings from him. And he goes to open war with the Eregion, and he regains 16 of the 19 rings of power that are out at the elves. Celebrimbor hides the 3. He gives them to Gil-galad and Galadriel, so they are gone. They are hidden. The other 16 are recovered because he's captured Celebrimbor and he's torturing him, and he's trying to get the whereabouts of the 3. He wants the 3 because those rings are more powerful than the other 16. They have the power to preserve and to do all this crazy stuff. Whereas the other rings are, they just basically, they stretch your life and preserve your life. But they don't have the power of the 3, whereas they can protect your kingdom and do all this stuff. So, and they turn you into wraiths and things like that, which the 3 don't. So Sauron wants the 3, and Celebrimbor won't tell him. So eventually he kills Celebrimbor, and now he completely wipes Eregion from the face of it. He completely destroys Eregion. So now he has the 16. He does his Sauron thing and redistributes them because he can shapeshift. So he redistributes the rings. He gives 9 to men who are ready as to his will. They want power. They want to be kings. He gives them the warriors, sorcerers, and kings of old, and they get the 9, and eventually they become the ring wraiths. He gives 7 to the dwarves. The dwarven rings, unfortunately for him, don't work on the dwarves because they were created by Owlet. Right.
Well, and also it mentions that the dwarves are very stubborn and they are not, able as easily corruptible under those rings. So okay, it's making a lot more sense now.
This is why you don't see any dwarven race, because their rings don't work like that. But they do make the dwarves more greedy and make them gold and lustful for things like that. And that brings different kind of problems to the dwarves to help Sauron out anyway. So the dwarves end up getting hoards. Each ring, at the center of each ring is a gold hoard that the 7 dwarf lords have, because the rings help them obtain gold and power and stuff like that. And they're completely greedy. And then dragons come because dragons hoard gold, and there's wars between the dwarves and dragons. So 4 of the rings are devoured by dragons, and 3 of the rings Sauron gets back, and he possesses them, and he even has them in the Fellowship of the Ring. He tries to redistribute them to the dwarves again, but he gets those 3 back. So there's 3 dwarven rings left. The other 4 are destroyed, and the 9, he has the 9, and he has them completely under his sway. And
Okay.
so, you know, that Gilgalad had two. He gave one to Círdan, and then Círdan ended up giving that ring to Gandalf. So Gandalf has the red ring of fire. Elrond, after Gilgalad died, got Gilgalad's ring, which is the
Okay.
ring of the air. And then we got Galadriel with the ring of water. And
Okay.
that's where the three are. The nine are with the nine, and then the three Sauron possesses, and the
Yeah.
other four are destroyed by
Okay.
Dragon of Fire.
Woo! Oh my gosh. Listeners, by the way, he does not have it. He doesn't have his book up. He doesn't have his notes in front of him. He just he just knows all of that. That's incredible.
Thank you.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for that clarification. I was very confused, and I know that I conveyed a lot of that confusion through to my listeners. So we got all that cleared up. And we know where the One Ring is now in this point in the story, which is that Isildur has it. Dun dun dun. So picking up now where we left off last week, Sauron is defeated? ? We'll see about that. Yes, Gilgalad died in the battle. Same with Elendil. We know all of those things. And Isildur, just like we see, Elrond recounting in Fellowship of the Ring, saying, that was the day men failed, and saying, cast it into the fire. Iconic moment.
I beg to differ. So
you beg to differ? What, that
beg
it's an
to differ.
iconic moment?
I mean, it's a very iconic moment in film wise, but Isildur is a great, great hero. He's a great leader, great hero, and because of the movies, people tend to think he's a bad guy or whatever the case may have you, when that's absolutely not the truth.
It did kind of have to like condense it down to just convey the idea that Isildur had the chance to destroy the One Ring, but obviously we know the One Ring corrupts, and so he wasn't able to throw it into, and destroy it. And yeah, it happens much more slowly here, I think. The ring that he held seemed to him exceedingly fair to look on, and he would not suffer it to be destroyed. And so that's that moment where or not moment, but you see it over time, kind of, he's like, I can't destroy it. This is my precious, Yeah.
The weird thing that nobody really knows, like when you're reading that, is no one is able to destroy the ring. It's not able to be done. So it's a mood point getting mad at anybody for not destroying it. Or if at the very least, if you're going to get mad at Isildur, get mad at Frodo. Get mad at anybody because no one's able to destroy it. It was destroyed by mischance.
Yeah. That still always blows my mind when I was reading for the first time and discovered how it was destroyed, and I'm like, oh, so Frodo didn't do it. It was a complete accident.
Yeah. Nobody has the strength of will to destroy the ring. So
I think Sam could have done it. I think if Sam had the ring, he could have done it.
Isildur kept it because he said it was a way. If you know his story, you kind of almost sympathize why he kept the ring. He lost everything at this point. Everything. He lost his entire family, his kingdom, and everything. And he was like, I'm not throwing this. I'm not destroying this. This is a weregild for my brother and my father, and like. And it wasn't like done out of like malicious intent, like really. You just like, man, this is everything I lost, man. At least I'm gonna keep the enemy's, treasure,
Yeah,
so.
That's true. I hadn't considered all of that. Yeah. But either way, Isildur meets his end. He is overwhelmed by a host of orcs, it says, while they're traveling, and there's this battle, and he falls into a river and puts the ring on because it gives him invisibility. And there the ring betrayed him and avenged its maker, for it slipped from his finger as he swam, and it was lost in the water. So here we have this introduction of the idea of the ring kind of having a mind of its own and always wanting to go back to its owner, or putting itself in a place where it'll be more likely to get back to Sauron. And then, he obviously becomes visible again and he's killed. So Rest in peace, Isildur. I'm sure that'll be much more tragic for us to see play out in the show if they go that far in the timeline, because we'll have gotten to really know Isildur by that point, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in the show, yeah.
Meanwhile, so most of this, the rest of this section, by the way, listeners, most of it is setting things up so that they play out how we saw them play out in Lord of the Rings. The shards of Narsil, Elendil's sword that broke during the battle, end up in Imladris or Rivendell. And Elrond foretold that the blade will not be forged again together until the One Ring has been found again. Because at this point, it's been lost and they don't know where it went. Over time, a lot of the men it says, the men became divided into petty realms and lordships, and their foes devoured them one by one. So we're seeing the race of men dwindling and separating and dividing. We see the kind of creation of the Dunedain officially, these rangers that we see Aragorn become, the group of people that he belongs to before he returns to Gondor. And then what happens next? Oh yeah, Gondor. So over in Gondor, Minas Ithil, which used to be Isildur's family's tower, realm, whatever you want to call it, they abandoned it because they had to flee from Sauron. And that turned into Minas Morgul. And then on the other side of the river is Minas Anor, which was his brother Anarion's reign, you know, and that turned into Minas Tirith.
There you go. Look at you. You acting like you don't know this stuff. You know this stuff.
I only know it because I wrote it all down.
Hey, listen, whichever way you gotta retain it. You know what I'm saying? You got it done. You know what I'm saying?
I feel insane whenever I'm explaining all the. It's like
have to explain it right on.
It's
the
like
right
the
on
red string on a wall in a mystery show.
It's not hard at all. Mordor and Gondor are right next to each other, separated by the river Anduin. Right, so Sauron is defeated. Blah blah blah. Before that, they had put 2 towers to guard. One to guard Mordor to make sure things don't enter or leave. That's Minas Ithil. That is in basically the Morgul Vale before it's the Morgul Vale. And then they have in Mount Mindolluin. That is on the other side of the river. That is where Minas Tirith is. That is the guard Gondor from the men of the Dales. Like there's a whole bunch of men that always come attack. You know, whether they're Eastlings, whether they're Haradrim, you know, whatever the case. So those 2 things are basically guardian towers. And then Osgiliath is the city that's on the river. That's where they both share their throne, but individually, Anarion has Minas Ithil, Anarion has Minas Anor, and Isildur has Minas Ithil. Now, after everything happens, you know, obviously the tower gets taken, and Minas Ithil turns into Minas Morgul. It's no longer, the Gondorians don't possess it anymore, you know. And then, but they do have Minas Anor, which becomes Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, because this is where the main city's going to be, and they're going to guard everything. And that's what you know of in the Third Age. And that's where the main kingdom of Gondor is now there, as opposed to Osgiliath.
Yes. And this is where we also have, you know, this huge question of lineage and kingship in Minas Tirith, because Isildur dies. His family has been, you know, away from here, roaming about. So his brother's, one of his nephews becomes the king in Minas Tirith of Gondor. And it's his lineage for a while. And then there's, I was looking at the like lineage tree of the different kings and stuff of Gondor. It's wild because it mentions at some point in this section that there's a plague that wipes things out. And you can see if you look up this tree, by the way, maybe I'll link it in the episode description. It jumps from like, okay, well now this king and all of his kids die, so I guess his nephew is now the king. And then the nephew's like youngest cousin is now the next king. And it kind of does that for a while until the last of Anarion's line dies out. And that is the last king of Gondor until Aragorn comes back.
So Eonor gets challenged by the Witch King of Angmar to single combat. And he goes to Minas Morgul and never comes out again. So then the stewards pick up the line, and we end with Steward Denethor, where you know of in the Third Age.
Oh, the most tragic part, honestly, of Lord of the Rings for me is Denethor and his treatment of his perfect, amazing son, Faramir.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, that's not for thousands of years in the future. Yeah, so that's all going on in Gondor. Yeah, meanwhile, Elrond, of course, has the shards of Narsil. They're hanging in Rivendell. And yes, these 3 rings, just like we were talking about, that the elves have, one goes to Galadriel, and she is in Lorien. Mm-hmm. One goes to Elrond, and he's in Rivendell. And then it originally went to Círdan, and then the book kind of leaves it up to a little mystery for a minute. It says that they purposefully kept the 3rd ring hidden. So Círdan theoretically has it, but they know that he doesn't actually possess it, and that they're choosing to keep it hidden just in case. And eventually they are starting to realize that when the One Ring is found again, and Sauron his return is inevitable, when these things happen, like either way, the elves are the reign of elves, their time is going to come to an end one way or another, because they're either going to be controlled and ruled by Sauron, yikes, or they're going to have to destroy the One Ring, and in turn destroying the power of their rings. So they're recognizing that the age of elves is going to, it's time for an end after 3 ages. I think it's time, and that the dominion of men will begin. Yeah. There's some little shadows rustling around in Mirkwood, and that is where Sauron, like the first rumors and whisperings start happening that Sauron is coming back and he is rising to power once again. Then, it doesn't even say, so I think we know and we can assume that they were sent by the Valar, but it just says, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Istari. So it doesn't even say, oh yeah, the Valar sent them. It just says they appeared. So that's very, fantastical. Yeah, and these are our wizards.
Yep.
In case anyone is curious, so we know Gandalf's elven name is Mithrandir, but if you didn't know, Saruman is Curunir. And then I don't even think it does mention Radagast. Radagast doesn't get an elven name. At least I don't think it mentions it here. And then it says the other 2 went into the east and do not come into these tales. So I want to back up, though, because when we were talking about our your Rings of Power recap, you said, oh, I knew that the stranger was Gandalf. I don't necessarily know. We know that he's a wizard, right? And I think it's heavily implied that it's Gandalf. But here it says that of these, Curunir was the eldest and came first, and after him came Mithrandir and Radagast. So what if they're leading us to believe that the stranger is Gandalf, but it's actually Saruman? He's shaking his head, listeners.
So one of the reasons that can't be the case is because the only wizard that is fully aware of hobbits is Gandalf. The other wizard, like Gandalf, Saruman knows about the hobbits because of Gandalf. And Radagast never encounters him. He doesn't even know where the Shire is or anything. We know that from the Fellowship of the Ring. And then the other 2 go straight into the east. So they're setting it up to be Gandalf.
I do think it is Gandalf. I'm just thinking of what if they were playing this to go a different way to, you know, I don't know, another plot twist or something. And so maybe let's say the stranger was Saruman. Something really tragic is going to happen to make him not care at all about the hobbits, you know?
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
I don't know either. I do think they're really pushing on it's Gandalf.
Saruman's been a jerk from a longer time than a lot of people know.
I know, yeah. I don't think Saruman would have been that nice to Nori as the stranger was. So I do agree there.
We'll see though.
We'll see.
It's possible that,
you know, just some theories, just putting it out there. We have, you know, 2 years to talk about this.
A little bit of time to think about it.
Or maybe Saruman has already been there, and that's who Nori and I'm still calling him the stranger because it doesn't feel right to call him Gandalf yet, you know? Gandalf.
The follow my nose and the moth, he's Gandalf.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too, yeah. But it's still, he's not, I don't know, he's like not our Gandalf yet, so.
Not yet. But, and he doesn't have a name.
Yeah, but anyway, what if like when they're traveling, they're like, they find Saruman and he's already been there for a while and he's like, hey.
There you go.
I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, like I said, 2 years. 2 years to theorize and think.
Now you're thinking like I'm thinking.
Like you said, Saruman from the beginning has kind of been not a bad guy from the beginning, but definitely has those seeds and jealousy, tendencies. Yeah.
He's just a little mad about things, like when he wasn't made the leader of the White Council. He doesn't like that. He's envious of Sauron's power. You know, when his lore is the study of the rings, and then because of that, he's like, I wish I had my own rings. I'm going to find his ring. I'm going to replace Sauron. Like he starts to not care about things he should care about. He becomes fell. What they don't want to happen to the Istari when they go over, it happens to him. They don't want the Istari to get corrupted.
Do we think that's why? Is that why they sent the additional ones? Because they had a feeling. They're like, well, okay, there's plan A. Now let's send plan B, plan C, plan, what's the alphabet? D and E.
I don't think that was necessarily the case. I think they just were like, okay, we're limiting their power. We need to at least make it so they can be formidable to an extent, at least with a few of them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, because they don't want to go over there with full power, because then it's like the easier you'll fall. So they were like, no, you're not allowed to display your full power.
Okay, yeah.
So the Istari are nerfed comparatively. Like Olorin is Gandalf. He'd be much stronger in his Olorin form. You know, he's grounded into his physical form as the wizard in the Istari form. But somebody like Saruman is going to use more power than he should. He's going to, do things like that. And that's what they were hoping wouldn't happen, because it's easier to get corrupted the more power you use. Mm-hmm. So that's why you'll notice Gandalf never says he's going to directly challenge Sauron. He's like, no, I inspire others to do that, because it's not his place. They don't want him to do. They want you to inspire, just because they don't want somebody else to take the Dark Lord's place. So Gandalf is wise enough to know this. He's very humble in his beginnings. This is why they chose him. They said, you know what? He knows what he's talking about. He's going to be the leader. And then, he doesn't want to be the leader, so he lets Saruman be the leader. But Saruman's kind of like...
And that doesn't go according to plan.
Over well with him. He's kind of very jealous of that. Also, the fact that the Red Ring was given to him by Círdan doesn't go over well. Like, it's like, Círdan sees something in Gandalf. He sees pity. He has understanding of pity and stuff. And that's from his teachings from being one of the students of Nienna. And, he understands, pity and how it can actually rule the fate of men. And this is what he tells Frodo when he's talking about Bilbo not killing Gollum. And then at the very end of the movie, or the book rather, it's Bilbo's pity that ends up saving the world, because if he would have killed Gollum, the ring would have never got destroyed. So understanding that pity and the fact that Frodo didn't kill Gollum because Gandalf told him that whose tutelage ruled the world? Gandalf's.
Yeah. Man, powerful stuff. Saruman goes kind of among the realm of men and gets close with them, learns from them and teaches them too. Mithrandir is closest with the elves, and Radagast is with all the creatures,
all
the
the creatures and the birds.
And yeah, we don't know about the other two wizards. I would love to see them in the show. I think if they somehow pulled that off to do some stuff with the other two wizards, I think would be so cool. Since we know nothing about them, it would be really great to see that. Mithrandir, Gandalf, I'm probably going to alternate between those two just because the text right now is just calling him Mithrandir. He starts getting he starts getting a gut feeling, you know? He's like, something doesn't feel right. Yeah. And he goes to Dol Guldur and sees that, oh yeah, Saruman is coming back. It's happening, and it's happening now, and we need to do something about this. They put together this council, like we said. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance, save to those who sent him, and he would abide in no place, nor be subject to any summons. And so now this is when Saruman is really interested in the Rings of Power and starts looking into it. And then finally it's kind of coming to a head, and they're having a meeting. And Mithrandir and Elrond are both kind of like, yeah, I think the One Ring is still out there. I think it's very close to being found. Sauron is close to returning. And Saruman says, "For I believe not that the One will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago, I deem, it was rolled to the sea. There it shall lie until the end, when all this world is broken and the deeps are removed." And boy, does he come to eat his words later.
Yeah. Well, he's saying that on purpose, you know. He's telling them, hey, the ring's lost, because he wants to find it himself. So he actually has people searching the river while all this is happening. He's trying to bide his time and give them misdirection so they won't search for the ring. So they're not on their guard, and he's trying to find it. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, meanwhile, during this meeting, I'm sure Gandalf and Elrond are just making eye contact, like, we'll have to come up with a plan on our own. We'll have to do something else.
We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. Saruman sees that some of Sauron's spies are looking near the river, and then he asks Radagast to like borrow some of his birds, and I'm sure Radagast was like, "Sure, why do you need them?" And Saruman's like, spies. They're gonna help me look for the One Ring. But still, at this point, everyone thinks that he's on their side. And I don't think I realized that Saruman's like deception had started this early. I thought it was much later in the game, like after Bilbo found the ring and everything. I thought it was much later. So it's very surprising that like he was able to deceive everyone of his allegiances and his motivations for that long.
Yeah, he's a trip, man. Saruman's no joke. He's very smart. He was very close to finding the ring too. That's the scariest part. Very close.
This is where like I have to like go back on my word from, I don't know, maybe a year ago now, from when I was watching the Hobbit movies, because anytime it cut to Gandalf's side of the plot, I was very confused. A lot of it was really ridiculous. I do still stand by the fact that in that final battle that it's in, what's the last one called? The Battle of Five Armies. That's it. Oh my gosh. In the final Hobbit trilogy movie, there's the quote unquote final battle between Sauron and Gandalf and Elrond and Galadriel and everything. I do still think that is it was an absolutely ridiculous, like cinematically, I don't know. It was ridiculous.
I thought it was the worst thing ever.
Yeah. it's nuts.
Very crazy.
All of that essentially kind of did happen. They did have this showdown with Sauron in this kind of like in between form, and they banish him. It's another thing where it's like, okay, well, we defeated him, but just for a little bit. He's
Yeah, we drove him out of Dol Guldur. We drove him out of this stronghold and, pushed him out of here. So now, he has to go retreat and hide somewhere else.
Yeah, we bought ourselves some time here. But yeah, I was reading this and I'm like, oh, you're kidding. All of that crazy stuff that I watched in The Hobbit actually did happen? Okay.
Galadriel threw down the tower, but it was all a plot of Sauron. He tricked them. He let them win, and he went back to Mordor. So he feigned to flee. Like he acted like he was, he's like, oh, but the whole time he was, misdirecting them, doing the Kansas City Shuffle, so they look one way, and then he has an open avenue to rebuild Mordor and Barad-dûr, his stronghold. While they're pushing him out of there, all his beings and creatures are going back into Mordor and rebuilding it and fortifying it. And then he goes there and not too soon after declares himself. So it was all a plot on his he did that on purpose. And I that's why one of the reasons I really love Sauron. He's super smart and it was ingenious, They're like, oh, we did it. But he let them do that, to think, so they could really think that they did something. But meanwhile, he just was a trick.
Yeah.
And
you
now
really
he has
thought you did something there,
back.
Didn't you?
And we see how hard his stronghold is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, they're still super unsure of where the ring is. And then the funniest thing happens. It was found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river, and by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark, hiding under the roots of the mountains. And it stays there for a while. It was found again by a wayfarer, fleeing into the depths of the earth from the pursuit of the orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Perianoth, the little people, the halflings, who dwelt in the west of Eriador. So that's the plot of The Hobbit, everyone, in case you were wondering if it sounded familiar. So this is, it's sharing everything that Mithrandir is doing, that Gandalf is doing to prevent the One Ring from coming back to Sauron, to prevent the rise of Sauron. And then meanwhile, he has time to go on this little side quest with Bilbo and the dwarves to the Misty Mountains with all the trolls. And it's just so funny when you put like The Hobbit, this like sweet little, fairy tale bedtime story, into the larger context of this universe is so funny to me. They put some of the Dunedain on guard, kind of like patrolling around what, we know as the Shire, essentially, patrolling around this area of land, kind of keeping an eye on things just in case something happens. And then sure enough, things happen. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, where is it? The 39th heir in the right line from Isildur. He comes back and battles, all that stuff that we know has happened. It says, for Frodo the Halfling, it is said, at the bidding of Mithrandir, took on himself the burden, and alone with his servant, poor Sam, and alone with his servant, he passed through peril and darkness, and came at last in Sauron's, despite even to Mount Doom. And there into the fire where it was wrought, he cast the great ring of power, not exactly how it happened. And so at last it was unmade and its evil consumed.
There you go.
Crazy. And we learn, and the tree of Gondor starts flowering again. Aragorn returns to the throne. And Mithrandir and the rest of the elves are setting forth to the Undying Land, since, like we said, they knew that the time of the elves is at its end. It's time for them to move onward. And this is where we learn that Círdan had given Mithrandir his ring.
Yeah.
Question, does Círdan go with them, or is he still
He's
there?
the last person to go to Valinor. he is in charge of ferrying everyone back and forth, and he has never been to Valinor. He never wanted to go until finally, like he's finally like resolved to go. Like he's the oldest living being in Middle Earth, and he once all the elves are over, he finally goes over, and he's the last person to go over to
So does
Valinor.
he just like get in a little rowboat by himself?
I'm assuming he just takes one of his his ships. He's the shipwright, so.
Yeah, but you got to have a crew to operate that, right? There's no way unless he
Oh,
has.
Kid was taught by the Valor. He was taught by Yanwei, not Yanwei. No, he was taught by Osei and Olmo and stuff. The art of sailing. So I think he can manage it himself.
Oh, okay, okay.
Or he at least did go with the crew, and he was just they were the last ones to arrive. But
Yeah, yeah. Man, Círdan is a very interesting character who's just kind of in the background of most of this. I've never really thought about it that much.
He does a lot. He actually plays major parts, and for him being one of the Philathrum in in Valerian, that's on the coast, he interacts and knows a lot of everything that's happened, and he literally raised Gilgalad, raised Elrond and them, and like they were raised by their foster Maglor and Maedhros, but then he got them after that, and they were brought up. It was Círdan had a quite the influence on modern Middle Earth, the Third Age Middle Earth, because of everything he's seen. He's got to be the wisest. He's got to have the most knowledge of everything. That's happened. He's from Cuiviénen, where no one there in the Middle Earth at that time was from Cuiviénen except for Círdan, and he's the only elf with the goatee, the beard.
I don't think I ever knew that. That's funny.
Yeah, he's the only elf with a beard.
Anyway, yeah, Galadriel, Elrond, Mithrandir, and then of course, it doesn't mention here, but Frodo and Bilbo join them as well, and they go off with the 3 rings, elven rings. In the twilight of autumn, it sailed out of Mithlond until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it. And the winds of the round sky troubled it no more, and borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world, it passed into the ancient west, and an end was come for the Eldar of story and of song. The end.
The elves, they dwindle and they go out of they dwindle in Valinor, and they wane, and the men wax. It's the time of men in the Fourth Age. So
they've had 3 ages. I think it's
they've
time.
had more than 3 ages. We just started at the when the sun rises. That's the start of the first age. But
okay, elves, so there's like a 0 age.
Yeah, they like the years of the trees are uncounted technically. That doesn't count as an age. The elves were there before the trees. You know what I'm saying? Like the elves were there.
Yeah.
For not before the trees, but they were there for quite some time.
Well, I feel like I've been reading this book for 3 ages.
Remember when Melkor was captured? That was 3 ages he had to be captured in the halls of Mandos, and the elves were around. They were in Valinor at that time.
Oh.
Yeah, and then the time of the trees, they were there after that, and then before they even left, Melkor was free for a long time, influencing them and tricking them and stuff, and then finally the sun rose, and that's the beginning of the first age that lasted for 500 and something years, and the second age 3,000 something years, third age 3,000 something years. So Círdan is oldest. Excuse my language.
He is, yeah. That's pretty crazy scale of events. That's all started with some darkness, and then music, and then some trees, and then a giant spider.
I'm noticing that for somebody who doesn't like the Silmarillion, you seem to know an awful lot, man.
I know vaguely. That's the thing. I think I have the gist of it now.
Yeah, now you're getting the gist of it.
If a more casual Lord of the Rings fan were to talk to me and ask me about, like, oh, what's the Silmarillion, or what are the Silmarils, and again, interested to see what is going to happen with the Rings of Power show, and what they will and won't be able to go into, depending on what rights they have and everything. But I think if someone were to ask me, like, what's up with the Silmarils? Who's Feanor? You know, who's Melkor? I think I would be able to generally explain it. Actually, I don't know how I would do this, but I kind of want to do like an episode of Drunk History, but it's Drunk Silmarillion, and I just get drunk and I try to recount the Silmarillion to someone.
Hey, make it happen.
Oh my God. We need a lot of alcohol. So it's a big story. It's a long story. I think we'd be there all night, you know?
I'll make some time for you, you know what I'm saying? You can drink, I can just listen.
I know, I know Don does Tipsy Tolkien, so maybe I could my problem is that I have all these ideas and then I have zero execution. So we'll come back that you're going to
make it happen. You're passionate. You're going to make it happen.
Oh my gosh.
Take alcohol. There you go. You're in there.
So yeah, I brought you on for this very monumental episode where I'm finishing the Silmarillion because, I mean, I joke a lot about hating the Silmarillion, and I do kind of think it's the worst book ever created, but I brought you on because you are so passionate about it. And I don't know, do you want to give a quick little closing, not an argument, because I still always, you know, when people are passionate and excited about things, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So you're not having to defend the Silmarillion, but do you want to give a closing statement about the Silmarillion?
I stand by my love for the Silmarillion. I think that it is the greatest work of Tolkien. It culminates everything and ties everything together. You'll get a real appreciation for it. Not maybe after one read, maybe not even after two reads, but multiple reads, it'll sink in. And I still have faith that absolutely even you will love it. You're gonna have whoa moments where you're like, wow, I did not realize that. Because when you're so caught up in trying to understand something, sometimes you don't understand it. You don't get what you're too close to it to see what's happening. And then sometimes out of nowhere, like if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't say it to you. It's not like I got the Silmarillion my first time. It took me 5 times trying to read the book to finally be like, oh, Eureka, you know. So it's not like I'm expecting you to be like, oh, I love this is my favorite thing. But if you give it a chance and you really want that, if you want it, if you don't care about it, then it could be a headache. It could be a headache and it was like a drab. It was like a drag. Fine. But if you really are set on like understanding Tolkien's works as a whole, the Lord of the Rings and everything that happened within it, the Silmarillion is key. And it is monumental. And it's once you get it, you got it. Like once you get it, it becomes different. It becomes different than how you're looking at it, like an assignment or an essay or like a problem. It becomes different. It completely flips on its head and becomes a blessing. It becomes like, you know what I'm saying? Like you have the knowledge, you have it really lends so well to the Lord of the Rings. It's ridiculous. It gives so much back to the Lord of the Rings that you become like empowered, and you're like, I can't believe I didn't know this, or I didn't get this, I didn't connect this, or it makes everything brighter. So that's my argument. Just give it a chance if you want to. If you're not about that Tolkien life, stick with the Lord of the Rings. It's cool. You don't got to be. Everybody doesn't have to be a Silmarillion expert. Everybody, that's not for everyone. You know. Yeah.
All right. The prosecution stands. I'm banging a gavel. I know nothing about how a courtroom works. Beautiful words, wonderful sentiments that I'm sure a lot of listeners also feel. Thank you so much for being here for this, like I said, monumental moment. Does that work? Monumental moment in
monumental.
time.
This is you finished the book, so it's monumental. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it. You know, we didn't war as much as I thought we would, but
no, I'm not going to bring you on for us to argue, you know, to have a real legit argument. No, there's too much negativity and toxicity out there on the internet, and I have no business contributing to it. So Where can people find you on the internet? And are there any special projects or anything that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok at KnewBettaDoBetta. You can find me there. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on YouTube. All KnewBettaDoBetta. I'm also on Reddit. I don't know why, because this is like a terrible, terrible place. But shout out to the people on Reddit who do show me love. But there's, Jesus, the people that are just, they're on a different type of time there. Anyway, I am currently teaching classes. I'm teaching the Silmarillion, as it were. I'm teaching KnewBettaDoBetta's Guide to the Silmarillion. So I have my last 2 classes coming this Monday and Tuesday. And then December classes you can enroll in December classes now. So if you want to do that, you can go on my TikTok and click the link in the bio, and you can enroll into the classes, KnewBettaDoBetta's Guide to the Silmarillion. And it's me literally teaching the entire Legendarium of the Silmarillion. We also have a podcast, me and my co-host, Callie Cosplay, and you can find us at Voices of Arda, ARDA, Voices of Arda. That's on YouTube, that's on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. So hopefully you guys check me out in those places, and voila.
Yes, all of that will be linked in the episode description. I was on an episode of Voices of Arda. I wasn't sure if it had come out yet, but I think it's again, everything has been such a blur of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, go check everything out if you want to comprehend the Silmarillion on a better level of understanding. Definitely look into those classes. We enjoy, I say we, the listeners and I enjoy having you on and hearing from you. So I'm sure the classes are just as wonderful, except for my stupid voice is not a part of them. So they're even better.
Love your voice. Love your sense of humor.
That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, you can go to WBNE.org. The cover is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/talkingaboutpod. You can follow the podcast on social media at TalkinAboutPod, and you can follow me on TikTok and Twitter at MCWattsUp and on Instagram at MCTurnDownForWhat. If you want to support the podcast, you can become a patron. Go to patreon.com/talkingaboutpod to see the different levels of support that are available. But again, I appreciate any level of support that you want to show. And all patrons for the month of December will be receiving a little something special in the mail just for the holidays, nothing crazy. So one, if you are a current patron, make sure that you have your mailing address updated in your Patreon information. And two, if you want to receive that little something something, sign up and become a patron. And if you want, you can delete your pledge at the end of the month. Or you can become a sponsor like Christina. Christina, thank you so much for your continued support of the podcast. It means so much to me here at the end of all things. How many times have I said that? No, but really, we just finished the Silmarillion. That's incredible. So thank you for being here to support me through this time. And hey, speaking of that, the end of the Silmarillion, we're here. So now what? I have a list of a couple things that I want to do. They're all random and there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. So I will just be doing it in the order that I want to, and that makes the most sense for me in terms of scheduling and planning and recording. And actually, in the month of December, I'm going to take a few weeks off. It's the holidays. It's crazy. I have travel plans. I have plans with friends and family. I have to wrap presents, and that takes me entirely too long. So I'm going to take a few weeks off and regroup so that I have a plan of action for 2023. So there won't be an episode next week, but come back the week after that, and we will be discussing letters from Father Christmas. As I understand it, this is a book of letters that Jolkin Rolkin wrote to his children from Father Christmas, as they call him overseas, over yonder. And that sounds really wonderful and wholesome, and I'm excited to dig into it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes. Oh, do you have any parting words for the audience?
Man, if you knew better, you do better.
And that's what I'm talking about. That was fun. It was like both of our little catchphrases.